The young and the restless spoilers shock. The reckoning of Lily's loyalty and Cane's descent. The winds of Genoa City were shifting. Dark secrets lingered in every shadow, and beneath the polished facades of power, revenge simmered, threatening to consume anyone daring enough to venture too close. Lily Winters found herself at the center of this turmoil, a pawn, a player, and yet, an unwilling accomplice in a game that seemed far larger than she had anticipated. Victor Newman, ever the strategist, had always known the importance of control, especially when it came to his enemies. Cane Ashby had become a problem. A loose cannon whose thirst for power was dangerously close to toppling everything Victor had worked for. It was clear that Cane's involvement in Damien's death was only a small piece of the puzzle, one that Victor wanted to solve, not just for the sake of vengeance, but for the sake of securing his own legacy. But more than that, Victor had a personal stake in the matter. Cane's dangerous rise to power could pose a direct threat to everything he had built, and Victor wasn't the kind of man to let that go unchecked. Lily, Victor's voice was calm but insistent, you must be strong. Not just for your own sake, but for your family's. The death of Cane will be the beginning of something much bigger. But it won't end with him. We need to know who stands behind him, who is pulling his strings. And you, Lily, you are going to be the one to find out. Lily felt a chill race down her spine. There was no mistaking the underlying threat in Victor's words. He didn't just want Cane gone, he wanted to uncover the dark web of influence that the man was tangled in. To Victor, Cane was a loose end that needed to be neatly tied, but to Lily, the stakes were personal. The man who had deceived her, manipulated her, and broken her trust was still out there. She couldn't erase the betrayal, nor could she forget the cruel games he had played with her heart. And yet, despite the hatred that burned in her chest, Victor's proposition seemed like a cruel temptation, an opportunity for her to not just destroy Cane, but to become the woman she never thought she could be, someone strong, someone who controlled her own fate. You're asking me to betray him, Victor, Lily replied, her voice cold, though the fury beneath it was unmistakable. Victor's eyes narrowed. I'm asking you to do what's necessary. You've already lost him. Don't let him drag you back into his lies. Use him to get what you need. But don't let yourself become blinded by his charm. Trust no one but me. What Victor didn't know, what he couldn't understand, was that Lily's hatred for Cane ran so deep that it left no room for mercy. But the more she played her role, the more she feared she might slip. What if she was becoming too good at deceiving him? What if, in her efforts to get close to Cane, she truly began to care for him again? The arrangement between Victor and Lily was one of secrecy. No one, especially Nikki, knew of their agreement. This was a covert operation, one where Lily was the instrument of Victor's wrath, and if she succeeded, she would be the one to expose the true mastermind behind Cane's rise. But deep within, Lily fought a growing unease. She was playing a dangerous game, and Victor's cold confidence did nothing to reassure her. She wondered, in the dark recesses of her mind, if she might be walking into a trap of her own making. Meanwhile, Cane, ever watchful, never allowed himself to trust anyone completely. He had seen Lily's coldness towards him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. He had sensed her growing closeness to Victor, her secretive behavior, the way her eyes would dart nervously whenever Victor's name was mentioned. Cane's instincts were sharp, and he began to piece together the puzzle that Lily had been carefully trying to conceal. She was playing him. He had no doubt. But why? At first, Cane tried to dismiss the idea, telling himself that he had to focus on his own agenda, his own power. But the nagging thought wouldn't leave him. He needed Lily to be loyal, to trust him completely, but how could he expect that when she was clearly working against him, conspiring with his greatest enemy? One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the city, Cane's suspicions finally broke the surface. He had caught her. Lily, his supposed confidant, had been texting Victor in the dead of night. Her hands trembled as she typed, her eyes darting nervously across the room as though she feared being caught. Cane's blood boiled. How dare she betray him like this? How dare she play him for a fool? His anger consumed him, clouding his judgment. The desire for control, for vengeance, drove him to act in ways he never thought possible. He couldn't let her slip away, not after everything he had invested in her. Not after the countless lies she had fed him. No, this time, he would make her pay for her betrayal. In a fit of blind rage, Cane kidnapped Lily. He couldn't afford to let her escape, not now when he was so close to unraveling the truth. He locked her in a dark, cold room, binding her to a chair, the sharp metal biting into her wrists. His voice was low, dangerous, as he loomed over her. "Tell me everything, Lily. Every word you've whispered to Victor. Everything you've been hiding from me. I know you're working with him. I can see it in your eyes." But Lily, despite her fear, remained defiant. Her resolve only strengthened in the face of Cane's cruelty. She glared up at him, unbroken, unyielding. "You think you can scare me into telling you everything? You're wrong, Cane. I'll never betray my loyalty to my family, not for you, not for anyone." Cane's anger flared once again, but there was something in her words that struck him harder than any physical blow. She wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of Victor. She was stronger than he had given her credit for. And that realization shook him to his core. The tension in the room was unbearable as Cane wrestled with his own emotions. He had underestimated Lily, again. He had thought he could control her, manipulate her into submission, but now, more than ever, he saw the woman she was becoming, defiant, unyielding, and relentless. She had her own path, and it wasn't one that would ever lead back to him. Lily sat in silence, her gaze unwavering, as Cane's fury slowly began to fade into something else. Something much darker. In that moment, he realized that his plan, his careful control over her, had all been for nothing. He had tried to break her, but it was Cane who was falling apart. Outside, the night stretched on, silent and heavy, as the secrets of Genoa City continued to unravel in ways no one could predict. The truth, however, was still a long way from being uncovered. Would Lily remain loyal to Victor? Would Cane ever truly control her? Only time would tell. Though the road ahead seemed more treacherous than anyone could have imagined. As Lily sat in that chair, bound by both her past and her future, she knew one thing for certain: the game had just begun. The tipping point of deception and betrayal. Genoa City had always been a place where secrets festered beneath the surface, but tonight, it seemed as though every hidden truth, every dangerous game, was about to explode. Cane Ashby, the man who had once been a loving partner, a father, and a trusted member of the Newman Empire, had now become something darker, something unrecognizable. His actions were no longer about power, no longer about control, but about revenge. And Lily Winters, the woman he had once loved, was the target of his wrath. Lily had always known that Cane was dangerous. His lies, his manipulations, and his betrayals had torn apart the trust they once shared. But she never imagined he could go this far. The coldness in his eyes, the fury in his grip, she had underestimated the depths of his cruelty. When he slapped her, the force of it didn't just sting her face, it shattered any illusion she had left about the man he used to be. Her head spun, and her cheek burned with the slap's aftershock, but there was something deeper that cut even worse, the realization that Cane, in this moment, was capable of far worse than she had ever imagined. "You think you can deceive me, Lily?" Cane's voice was low, menacing, as he towered over her. "You think you can play me for a fool, after everything I've done for you? After everything we've been through? You're nothing but a traitor." Lily, bloodied and bruised, struggled against her restraints, the ropes cutting into her skin. Her heart pounded with fear, but her mind was sharp. Cane might have taken her body, but he could never take her will. She clenched her jaw, refusing to let him see the tears that burned in her eyes. "You're wrong, Cane. I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore." But Cane, no longer the man she once knew, was relentless. He had become a monster, consumed by the darkness inside him. The slap had only been the beginning. He left her in that room, locked away with nothing but the cold silence and her thoughts. He refused to feed her, to give her any comfort or mercy. The hours dragged on, each one more agonizing than the last. But Lily was strong. She would not break. She couldn't. Meanwhile, in a darkened corner of the city, Victor Newman paced anxiously. He had tried reaching Lily, tried calling her time and time again, but she had not answered. His gut twisted with dread. Something was wrong. Victor knew his daughter-in-law well enough to understand that Lily would never ignore him, especially not with the stakes so high. He could feel her in danger, feel the impending doom closing in on her. There was no mistaking it, she was in the hands of a man who was capable of anything. I can't reach her, Nikki. I need to go to Cane's, Victor said, his voice tight with urgency. Nikki, standing at the door with a worried expression, shook her head. Victor, you can't. Cane is dangerous right now. If he finds out you're coming, he could do something worse to her. But Victor wasn't listening. The walls were closing in around him. I know what Cane is capable of, but I can't sit here and do nothing. I have to make sure she's all right. Nikki's face paled. Victor, don't do this. Think about it, if Cane has her, he'll never let you get close. He's too far gone. We need to think this through. But Victor wasn't thinking rationally anymore. The idea of Lily suffering, the thought that Cane might hurt her, was too much for him to bear. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything that had transpired between them. And yet, he was powerless. Cane had locked down his fortress. He had cut all ties with Victor, refused to let him come anywhere near the truth. And there was nothing Victor could do, nothing except wait, helpless and desperate. In Cane's twisted mind, the lies had become his truth. Every step he took was a calculated move, a masterful display of control, as he sank deeper into his madness. He wanted to break Lily completely. He wanted to crush her spirit until nothing was left but submission. But the more he watched her, the more he noticed something else, a defiance that wouldn't die, no matter how much he tried to extinguish it. You think you can play the victim, don't you? Cane sneered, his eyes cold as he stared at Lily, bound in that chair. You think you can manipulate me? But I know you too well, Lily. And you're going to pay for every lie. Lily's breathing was shallow, but she met his gaze without flinching. You're the one who's a liar, Cane. You've always been. But you won't break me. You'll never have that power over me again. For a moment, something in Cane's eyes flickered, a brief moment of doubt, a crack in his ice-cold exterior. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by an even darker resolve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, its edge gleamed menacingly under the dim light. You want to test me, Lily? Fine. But know this, if you don't talk, if you don't tell me everything I want to know, I will make you regret it. I'll make you wish you had never crossed me. Lily, her mind reeling from the fear and pain, refused to give in. Cane's threats didn't terrify her. What terrified her was the monster he had become, and the idea that he might actually follow through on his promises. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I won't break, she whispered, her voice steady, despite the chaos inside her. You can't make me. Cane's hand trembled as he raised the knife, but his anger was blinding, and the need to control, to break her, was consuming. He was losing himself in his own fury, his own despair, and in that madness, he found no reason to stop. The woman who had once been his ally, his love, had become his greatest enemy. And in that twisted logic, there was only one solution, to destroy her completely. Victor, meanwhile, paced anxiously, barely able to keep himself contained. His mind raced, replaying every moment he had shared with Lily, every piece of information he had about Cane. He needed to get to her, to make sure she was safe. But he was running out of time. Cane was spiraling, and the longer Lily stayed in his hands, the closer she came to breaking point. The question was no longer whether or not Cane would kill Lily, it was whether he could stop himself before it was too late. As the clock ticked on, the question lingered, would Lily survive this nightmare? Or was Cane truly the monster that he had become, capable of doing the unthinkable? The fate of all their lives rested in that single, fragile moment of truth.